Hello and welcome to the Babylon channel. Well, this is my continued journey to make the KS3979 top. I read the instructions, I've got all my material, my pieces all cut out and they're all ready to go. So final part, I suppose, even though it is just a mock-up, is to get it put together so I can understand what I'm doing in, I suppose, preparation for using the good material. So got my instructions, got everything else ready, better get on with it. Okay, step one, the interfacing. Better get this done because I like this to go off and be nice and stable, but being the first task, hopefully it'll be ready for me to use later. So interfacing done. I've not done a pocket on this occasion, but all the other bits that I need to do are done. So crack on with the next part. So first part of the sewing I've got to do is a little bit of stage stitching on the front here on this piece, and the darts. That's step number 1 or step number 2 and 3 according to the instructions. So better get on with it. So that little bit of stage stitching on the front is done. The darts are done. And the shoulder seams are done. Stage 1 done, I suppose. Now, I don't know if anybody can actually see this, but I'm using a contrast thread. I'm using white thread basically, because when I'm doing a mock-up, I want to see where I'm sewing. So if I have any issues, I can see where those issues might be. But anyway, next on the list is the collar. You know, that little collar facing piece that you always seem to put on almost every top? Well, that's next. The neck piece is now made. It's just those 3 pieces that are going to form that facing on the inside. I've just done a basic like zigzag, as it says in the instructions to do, just to finish the edge. I'll probably do a narrower, slightly more neater zigzag when I come to use the real material. But this is just a mock-up, just give me stop it from fraying, I suppose, and that's what you want me to do. So it says. Yeah, now I've got to put this actually onto the garment. So this is the front and that goes round the back. And of course this will never be simple because it is effectively like that. It's a curvature, and with curvatures they always seem to not go well for me. So this will probably take me a little bit of time to get on, but I will get it on. So the neck facing piece is actually done. It actually wasn't too bad. It went on quite well, really. This seems to be quite a good pattern in that the piece fits on without you having to like rumple it up and try and ease in any additional material. It seems to sit really quite well against that neckline. So didn't really have any problems with that, thank goodness. So on to the next bit, which actually in the instructions is this part here, this placket bit that I've got to put in here. So this is the part I think is going to be trouble, or at least I'm going to find difficult. So it's the part I'm probably going to spend the most amount of time on. So let's dive into this bit and see if I can work it out. And by the way, I've got a jumper on now because it's cold out there, very cold. It's trying to snow. Right, the first part of getting these button plackets bits together is that I've got 4 pieces here, 2 pieces there, 2 here. This is the bit with the interfacing on it. So this is the part without, and what I've got to do is line these up nice and straight and then sew along this edge here and here to make a whole piece, and then I've got to turn it through and press it, you know, make it all nice and neat. That's step number 1. Well, it's time to try and get these button placket bits into the actual top. Now, once I'd basically put the 2 bits together, I've got that. But then it tells me to put them into the actual into, hey, I don't know, just following the instructions. But what the instructions do tell me is that I've got 2 dots. one here, one here, and I've got to match the dots up, and I've got a small dot here and it's sitting just on the actual edge of the collar piece now. I've got to match that up, match this along here, match that dot to the lower, basically the lower corner of the stay stitching, and I've got to stitch along that line with both sides. Then it says to slit this piece here, which is on the front, and then at an angle notch down to the corner basically of where the stay stitching is. So I create a sort of slight V, and this needs to open up. So it looks a little tricky, to be quite honest. I'm not convinced it's going to work very well, but I shall give it a go and see where I get. Hopefully it won't be a total mess, but anyway, it's a mock-up. Mock-ups are for mistakes, and if I get it all wrong, at least I'll know for next time. Well, now that I've actually sewn these on, and what I've done is from this point here it said to slash down the centre and then open out the notch between the stay stitching, so you know, at an angle like that from this centerpiece. So that's opened it out more, and what it seems to be telling me next is that what I've got to do is I've got to take this piece and then I've got to press that forward, so it's pressed forward on there, and then also press this piece over, the seam allowance over. So I've effectively pressed those two parts. Yeah, it's sort of so that I'm pressing this over inwards, but I'm also pressing the seam allowance for this part, because that is effectively that part, I suppose, equivalent, isn't it? Because these two pieces together. So yeah, it looks a bit goofy and looks wrong to me, but I'm just going by the instructions. So hopefully, like I say, from this point here, if I take this one, from this point here, I will bring this over, press that seam, but also take in the seam allowance on this one and press that in as well. So better get on with pressing that and see how it sits, because I'm not convinced still. I'm still not convinced. Well, now that I've pressed the piece as said, I pressed that over, that's the inside, and I've pressed that seam allowance over, so I've got that piece. And then it's saying I now need to take this bit, opening at centre fold, I think that's what it's saying. Fold tabs along front seam, right sides together. So front seam, that's that one, right sides together, and then stitch along the top. Now this is the neckline here, this bit, and basically what it's telling me to do is to stitch along here to close this top edge, which to me actually does make sense, because I was wondering how I was going to close that top edge. And then when we turn this out and turn it back through the right way, that edge will form this innate top edge. So I've got to do that on both the pieces. So I better stitch that up and see how it sits. Well, now that I've actually stitched that top edge, I've stitched that and turned it through, and so I've got the corner at the top of the placket, and as you can see, it's actually sort of starting to come to shape, because what I've got is down the bottom here it overlaps the two placket pieces, because there's meant to be a button down here, and then obviously it separates slightly at the top here, which is what it's meant to do. So actually, yeah, it's starting to come together and actually get the right shape, which is really quite surprising. What it's saying to do is to top stitch around the whole of the edge, just to, I presume, to stop this from moving. But I mean, and also I've got to close this loose edge here. So yeah, some top stitching, I suppose, maybe. I mean, in the proper colour, and then it probably won't be so noticeable, but obviously I'm using white thread just as a contrast to see how it goes. But yeah, I think that's coming through. And then there's this thing of anchoring it down the bottom, which I should get to once I've done this bit of top stitching. Well, I've managed to get the top stitching done. Slightly tricky and it looks a bit rough, but then I can see the stitching because I wanted to see it because I've done it in white. But hopefully when I do it again but with the right colour thread on the material, on my good material, it won't really show up, and hopefully I'll do it a bit neater than that. But anyway, it's in. I've got both of these placket pieces in there, and you see they all sort of overlap. You're meant to put a button in down here somewhere, but I'm not sure I'm going to bother really. But the one thing I do have to do is tie it in at the bottom. Now it says that what I've got to do is pull this up, and where it pokes through, because you've got the little hole piece, we've got to get this lined up, pull this down, and then stitch across that bit to hold all this in place. And then trouble is I've got this great big lump at the end that's a bit messy, so I'm not quite sure how I'm going to tidy that up. But first of all, to secure it and to seal this bit in, I'll have to get and stitch that across there, make it nice and neat, pretty much on top of the stay stitching, just to hold it all in place. And then that bit will be pretty much done. Well, it's certainly coming along now then. I've done the side seams up after finishing this front placket piece. Now, I'll just come a bit closer. As you can see, this one, get some light upon that. This one I haven't got very neat, it's puckered up a bit, so obviously when I do this on good material I've got to be careful how I put this stay stitching in and how it gets finished off underneath when I do the underneath piece there, to make sure it doesn't pucker up, but it's come together quite nicely. Now I've done this in the medium. I haven't put the bottom section on. I've yet to do that bottom section, which obviously brings it down as a longer t-shirt, but at the moment it's just this top section. But yeah, I've done it as a medium, and I was thinking, is that going to be right? It's going to give me plenty of room, and it does. There's a lot of room in here, actually a lot more than I was expecting, almost to the extent I don't know, I'm contemplating whether I should go down a size. I could go with small for this pattern. I mean, there's a lot of material at the back, or I've got to try and make some adjustment to the pattern to take out some of this material on the back here, because there is loads of it. Look, it's just, there's a lot on the back, but obviously I need to be able to get it on over my head. So consideration is, do I go down a size, or do I adjust this to take out some of that material at the back? I mean, I could, I suppose, put some darts in the back there, put a couple of darts in, takes out a bit of material from the back, and then having done that, it still leaves me with a certain amount of ease, so that that bottom section will be alright, and I'll be able to still get it on over my head, because the shoulders seem fine. I like the way that it sits on me. I imagine that once I get the actual sleeve on, that shoulder length is just right. So the top section seems fine. It's just got a lot of bagginess around here. So yeah, maybe some darts in the back, that might help. So I've yet to see. So what I'll have to do really next is to put this bottom section on and see how that goes on. But yeah, it's coming along quite well, and even though it's only a mock-up, it certainly is helping to understand how it all goes together, considering it's really quite a simple t-shirt style top, and that's not much more than what it is. So better get on and get the other bits on so I can properly understand what I might need to do any adjustments, if I'm going to do any adjustments on this one. Right, next up is, according to the instructions, the bottom section. Well, actually it's not. It is actually the sleeves, but I'm just going to leave those for now. I'm going to come back to them later on. Yeah, because I do want to see how they look with the sleeves on. Just a short sleeve on there. Got considerations for that, but later on I'll have a look at that. Anyway, back to the instructions. It does tell me to put the pockets on the front section and then stitch the front and back lower section together, and then I'm onto the waist casing that it's called. So anyway, let's get this front and back together, which is here. I'll get this together and then focus on that casing, which again looks a little odd, but I don't think it's that tricky. It's just the instructions are a little odd, but anyway, I'll read through them once I've got this bit done. Now the casing piece comes in two parts, and I've stitched them together and then just pressed that seam open. You've got a longer piece and a short piece, and it says one is the front casing, the other one the back casing piece. But you know, I'm sure there's some logic to doing it rather than just one straight long piece. But anyway, here we go, all together as one piece now. Then it says to fold over the ends by the seam allowance, which is 1.5 centimeters, and press. So that's what I've done. I've pressed them over by the required amount, turning onto the wrong side to turn it in effectively, and then it does actually say to stitch this along here. I presume to just tack it, hold it in place, make sure it doesn't fold out. I mean, this is going to be a casing, so something's going to go through here. I think it's a piece of elastic. But now it also says, after having done these ends that I've turned, I've now got to turn this over by whatever amount. I'll have a look in a moment. I think it might be 1.5 centimeters, but I've got to turn this down now all the way. So effectively I'm tidying up the edge of that casing piece, because then we're going to find out how to put it on, because I'm not quite sure, to be honest. This has always been one of those parts where I've been not quite sure about how this is going to work. But anyway, I'm going to press this down and get it fixed into position and stitch it. Well, I've got the casing prepared as it says. I've folded over that edge. I've just pressed it over by the 1.5 centimeters that it says, and now I've got to get this attached to this bottom section. And what it says is to line it up around the edge and pin this. So I'm going to be pinning this all the way round. And initially I was like, well, how do you match this up? But actually it's quite simple. I marked it when I was actually cutting it out, because there are marks on it, and there is a mark here. I got two more marks. Now these appear to be the centre front and the centre back marks, and this mark here is my side seam, and this side seam is the point where these two join. So the front and back casing pieces join, and that is my marker for the side seam. So just need to get this pinned onto there, and then it says to stitch it. Get the instructions there. Pin waist casing to extension, right sides together at waist seam with raw edges even. Matching right side seams, centre backs, centre fronts and left placement line on the casing to left side of seam extension. Based in place. So it's not even telling me to sew this in, it's telling me to just baste it into position. So, okay, I'll put the big long basting stitch in there and see what happens. So that's the casing piece on the bottom section now. So as you can see, that's that piece that I've turned up, pressed it up, and then it says to basically baste it onto there. So I've just done a big long, very long stitch on there, onto that piece. And it's basically upside down, or it seems that way at the moment. This is the front, this is the bottom section, this is the front where the pockets would go, and then this is the front section, or the bottom section that would fit on, you know, down there onto the bottom half of the top piece. Now I've got to attach the top piece onto this part here, and somehow make this casing work. So that'll be interesting. I shall see how that goes. I haven't got the extension piece with the casing band put on, I'm now actually attaching this extension piece, I think they call it an extension, to the top part. So as you can, you can get it into shot. The bottom bit, as you can see, the top section, sorry, is now upside down, and the extension piece is inside out. So I've got where the edges are, the raw edges of the top of the extension and the bottom of the top bit, I'm now matching up right sides together. And as you can see, if I can get into shot, I've got this casing piece in between there. So that, I presume, will be once it's stitched round and you turn it through, then you'll have the casing part in the right place, I suppose. I'm sure I'll find out once I actually get it stitched up. Anyway, finish pinning this together and then I can stitch round. It says to stitch round twice, once at the seam allowance and then inside the seam allowance, you know, with that sort of 6mm stitch line that it quite often tells you to do as a, I suppose, a reinforcing stitch, isn't it, to help it to hold better. But anyway, nearly finished pinning it, so I'll get and finish that off, and then I can stitch round the whole of the bottom or top, however you look at it, and see how it sits. So I've stitched it round now, done my double stitch line. So all I've got to do really is just turn this out. So this is the top, and that's the extension. I just turn it down, and then see, I've now got this casing piece that is now, as it were, in between the extension and the upper piece. So according to the instructions, all I've got to do now, get my arm on there, all I've got to do now is stitch close to the edge, and then I've got this whole casing piece going round the middle of the garment. So I'll have a, I presume there's a drawstring, yes, an elastic drawstring sort of thing that you put through there, and you can tie up at the waist. And now the gap, as you can see, the gap comes back here, so that's where it meets, well, it doesn't meet, that's the idea. So once I've actually stitched along this top bit, I will have that channel, and it's gone in quite nicely actually. It's quite a simple design really. I quite like that, to put this extension piece on, and then I'll be able to try it on. Well, it's actually getting there, giving it a try on, and I think first impressions is that I could easily come down a size. This is the medium, and there's lots of room in this. It's so much more room than I was expecting. So yeah, I reckon I could easily drop down to the small pattern size and work from that. Now, there is quite a lot of room here in the middle, and I don't know how easy it'll be to see this, but that casing piece, which is there, obviously sits, that's my natural waist, so it is sitting just down a little bit from that. But I mean, that's not a problem. I mean, I've not done the hemming and I've not tied up some of the seams yet, because obviously I don't need to, it's a mock-up. I will put the sleeves on because I want to see how those sleeves sit. I'm having some considerations about this top, and I don't know, I want to change a couple of things, but I'm not totally sure that they'll necessarily work. So I think what I'm going to need to do really is to do another mock-up, but to do it in the smaller size, and also to put in a couple of those alterations that I'm thinking of, that I might do, that I think will make it better and make it fit better. But generally it's come together quite well, and I'm quite pleased with doing the mock-up, so I can understand quite how the different aspects of this have gone together. So I suppose really I just want to finish off what I'm doing on this mock-up and have a thought about the changes I might be making. Finally got the mock-up together. It's all done, got the sleeves on and everything that needs to be on there, so I can understand how it goes together, which is the reason for the mock-up. You know, I haven't, you know, hemmed and finish seams off, but I don't need to. I just wanted to understand how the construction was going to make it look, how it was going to go together from the instructions, might I add, which I did read. So yeah, this is what I get, and I do like it. It's a nice top, but there are some considerations, I think. Some things I'm going to have to think about with this. Things that I'm not totally sure about. As I've put this together, it's made me think, yeah, I might want to change that or do something different. So I will be making a second mock-up, and I will be doing some practice stuff. Like this section here, I'm probably going to cut out a piece of just the front panel and have another go at trying to do this section of this, like this button placket thing, because I just didn't get it very neat. So I need to sort of understand how I can make it neater. I understand how it goes in now. That was really not that difficult once I actually got into it, but I do need to do it neater so that when I come onto the real thing, the proper material, it won't end up looking like a dog's dinner. I don't really want to wear a dog's dinner, do I? So yeah, some considerations, some things to think about with this. So I'm going to have a thunk. I'm going to write my notes up, and then I'll be able to do some alterations. Now I'm going to do that in a separate video, because I imagine this is probably getting on a little bit already. So my alterations will be in my next video. So keep watching, and hopefully that won't be too long before I manage to get that sorted. But anyway, thank you for watching this video, and I look forward to seeing you in my next video. Bye!